Eshkalar, the world's greatest Canadian wizard. And one of the beauties of the universe is uniquity, or individuality, as you people call it. Because what that means is you wouldn't want to be me if you really knew what it was like to be Eshkalar. you, oh, And I probably wouldn't like to be you. It's not because there's anything wrong with you. It's just because our minds move in different directions. They consider different schema. Yeah. They enhance different systems of function and appurtenance. I have no idea what that word means, but it sounds cool. So, today I'm going to talk about a pretty deep subject, a mythological subject. I was kind of complete with mything adventures, or mything person, whatever it was, that thing I did. But now this one's going to explain a bit of something that's part of the real mythographic tradition. Now, in Romania, in the province of Transylvania, where Bram Stoker did literally get some of the ideas for the creation of his vampire character. He got the name, of course, from a local hero who had fought the Ottomans and his own people, and I don't know who else, anybody he felt like, for years. Anyway, that was Vlad Dracula. But the story he wrote represents fragments of a real tradition, a Romanian tradition, a tradition all through that mountainous countryside. That there are creatures that are shape changers. Some of them can change into wolves. Some of them can change into bats. Some of them lurk in the night. And some of them are fallen angels. This is the authentic Romanian tradition, is that of I believe they're called the egregoroi, I'm not sure. But it means watcher. And the idea, of course, is the expansion of the original Genesis piece that seems to suggest that angels were either sent to Earth or flung down to Earth or however they ended up here. And they ended up sort of shacking up with human women. Now, the obvious use for that idea is to explain the bones of giant dinosaurs in the ground and mammoths and things that otherwise, where the hell did that come from? And religion is philosophy. Science is also philosophy. There are two different forms of philosophy. In both cases, they are seeking to explain observable phenomenon with the philosophical tools at hand. In neither realm is there any reason to feel bad about that. It's just the way that the one tries to go forward, even though it's, the older you are, the more empowered you get, the less you want things to go forward, the more you want to stay on top and you don't want it to get. But still, science seems to be a growing thing, whereas religion considers itself to be iconoclastic and all enclosed, and it's not capable of growth because the gods were here and now they're gone. They said their words, they're recorded. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Go figure. Well, the priesthood understands that, but talk to two priests, they give you two different stories. So, it's all about editorial content. And that, in science and in religion, both of which are philosophical deliberations, that's inappropriate. So today, I'm going to talk about this idea of the vampire being an angel. The Genesis story seems to indicate that angels were, for whatever reason, sent to Earth, allowed to travel to Earth, assigned duties on Earth. Perhaps it was their vacation home while they were doing important stuff in the cosmic realm. I don't know. However, but some of these angels liked it down here. Why? Some people would rather be in a cabin out in Saskatchewan somewhere, right? With winter winds and snow and rain, and mosquitoes and flies, and because for them that's paradise. In our world, with furnaces and air conditioners and cars roaring by day and night, and neighbors arguing, and roaches and rats instead of mosquitoes and flies. That world isn't their world, they think, so they want to go away. See what I mean? Yeah. Anyway, So these angels apparently came to Earth. The general myth, which comes to us directly from Genesis, so it is a Jewish part of the Jewish cosmogony. They believe this. We believe this. It's an accepted truth throughout Christianity and Islam and Judaism that there were angels on Earth, and they started, with the human women. That's unfair. That leads to unreasonable expectations. And then you leave. And then we're there to oh, I should have stayed with Gabrielle. She says, "You, oh, I wish you had." You know how that goes. But anyway, so the story is that angels from heaven came to Earth and shacked up with human women. And for some reason, they stayed. According to the traditions based around those few sparse words in the 5 books of Moses, there's no real explanation unless, I don't read the commentaries. I look things up on Google and read everything I can, but I don't have any organized connection with the tradition of commentaries that there are in all 3 of the books, all 3 of the peoples of the books. We have lively discourse that takes place as to what does this word mean when it's here and there, and why are there numerical resonances in all the Judaic scripture that makes you think these guys were some of the most brilliant mathematicians who ever lived, and that scripture is largely mathematical puns. You don't get it because you don't have that level of intellect to conceive how they might do that and have fun with it. And these are their little messages between their generations, and you don't get it because all you got was a college education. Lucky. I hope you got high degrees with it too. But now it's time to open your eyes and see what's going on, to view the times instead of the narratives, and to see what must have happened, what might have happened, how this could apply to a people with a tradition, right? And here we are in Romania, where there's a tradition that angels came down from heaven to do whatever, scoodly poop, whatever you want to call it. Mr. Green, thank you. With human women. I'm not against them doing that. I like it too. I just don't like the fact that they leave our human women with unreasonable expectations, if you know what I mean. However, these angels stayed for some reason. The interpretation is, because now we're moving away from the Judaic scripture, we're moving toward the interpretations of future generations of inquiring minds wondering how this came to pass and why and what would be the implications of it, because that is what a healthy discourse does, explores these things. And they thought, well, why would they stay? If they hadn't done something wrong, they'd just come right back to God. Why would they stay on earth? Wait. If you start entertaining the notion that earth is better than heaven, do you see that you've thrown a lot of people in a tizzy? Heaven's not the reward for my earthly suffering. Earthly suffering was heaven. Heaven's not as good as earth because the angels didn't want to stay there in the presence of God that created everything. Instead, they came to earth to hump some earth women. So the question remains, well, why stay? If God said, because some of the other interpretations are there was a literal war, and God says you're banned from heaven, you can't come back, right? And they were stuck down here. Of course, the Christian tradition suggests that those angels went straight to hell and became devils. Yes, no? But the implication from Genesis has no discussion of any existence of a place called hell, because that wasn't crystallized in the philosophical discourse of the time yet, that idea of an infinite ultimate punishment as well as an infinite ultimate paradise reward. So you have to ask yourselves about the things they say about vampires, that they were immortal, that they dwelt in the night, that perhaps there's no proof, but even in the myths it's a strong tradition that there were shape changers among them. but they ruled the night. That generations of mothers told their children to keep them in bed at night. Don't go out, the vampires will get you. We use any tool, not to its intended purpose, but to our immediate purpose. If you don't get that, there's a place in cultural anthropology and a place in archaeology for you. You will learn so much. People are limited by the way people think. So anyway, the human conceptual cortex, which is not a physical thing, I mean as an idea, is limited by things that humans can only move in one direction on. A lot of you guys, scientists especially, think that that's impossible, that humans have infinite apprehension and that we can learn all there is to know about the universe and put it on Google so that no one will ever lose it again. Honeybees wiped out 2051. Chemical companies rejoice. Offer robot bees because they'll profit off it amazingly. Wow, I got a good phone. Imaginary phones are cool. They can look into the future. So anyway, I'm now going to move away from the myth, which is that the watchers, the ones sent to Earth, the angels sent to Earth from heaven, became vampires. I'm going to examine this now and ask you why that would happen. Well, I have a very, very simple idea that God is like the Green Lantern's battery. And if you're sitting in the holy presence, that's everything. You need nothing else. You are complete. Spiritually, physically, what else could you want? You're in the holy presence. God has acknowledged you. Did you need more? So, and then he sends you forth to do work in the world. And now you're out in what would be, I'm going to use human terms here to try to describe it, the cold and the vacuum of being away from God, sent out to do work on earth. And suborned by the charms of indigenous females. And I assume more than a few indigenous males, because look at the Sodom and Gomorrah story. You'll see there was a good bit of interchange and exploration going on at that time, or sheep chasing, whatever. But you get the point. And so why would these angels fallen? First of all, it seems impossible they wouldn't want to spend their whole time apologize and get back to heaven if heaven was what we say it is, the reward, standing in the presence. Why would they want to stay away? Kind of seems as if it was God says no, or they were so embarrassed, like they were, like monks caught masturbating, right? On camera, at the airport. It happens. You got to give up all those physical desires. Yeah, I will in a minute, as soon as I get off here. I'll go right back to being above human. So anyway, my thought on this topic, and I haven't talked to any angels, and I haven't talked to many vampires, because generally vampires and I don't get along. You probably don't know the story because it didn't come from this world. But in a place called the Westermark, I was attacked by a vampire in the night. The Empress Charissa, the Empress of the Bright Empire, she kept vampires and other creatures of the night as agents, of course, to work her will in the world. And she allowed them to hunt in the poorer quarters of town as their reward, other than paying them in cash. And so souls would be stolen, children would be kidnapped and eaten. Vampires would roam the night. Just a little. And as soon as the alarm went off, all the paladins all showed up. Well, there's no vampire here. Oh, that poor person. Just like Mad Jack and the Queen's surgeon. Yeah. So anyway, these angels had to have a reason for drinking human blood. And there are a couple of things you could think of. What would an angel need to drink human blood for? Well, fun. Okay. That's not really a tradition, except in terms of becoming corrupt, right? I'll just treat this human like, well, why don't you eat a steak? Dang, drinking blood. Really? So I think there's a reason for that, which other people don't get, because they think in terms of the horror, they think of the scare factor. They never think, well, how would this happen? What would happen if a scientist came upon this and began to explain it and was killed? And another scientist found his notes and pursued it to completion, putting the little Vlad in the ground with a 1, 2, 3, 4. Want to make sure. So that's how I write Gothic horror. I do it that way. You are exploring into this dark corner of existence that maybe holds secrets that your science does not understand or would not accept. So, why would a vampire need to drink blood? Why would an angel become a vampire and drink blood? It's an angel. Well, maybe it has to eat food. Maybe it's like Goku. Oh, look, this dog, but has to eat all the time. Or maybe drink blood. Maybe blood gives it something special that it doesn't get from eating meat. So here's my idea. If an angel breeds its blood into a human bloodline, because like we says, they were all happy with humans, perhaps some of the spark of angelic power is born in some of the progeny of those unholy unions. If so, perhaps there is a stage of life at which the power in that blood is strongest. And if this angel, deprived of the Holy Presence, deprived of his Green Lantern's light, gets a bite on some of that just at the right time, he gets a little bit of his power back, or maintains for a little while. And this gives rise to the idea of pantheons. Why would angels get together and work if they ran away from God in the first place, or they're hiding from him, or he says, that's it for you. I shake the dust of your dust from my heels. Well, I'm thinking it's because they could breed a little bit of the holy factor into human bloodlines, and then they could feed off those selectively. And that is how you get the ideas of mortals and gods and half-mortal, half-god heroes and vampires and werewolves and all these things, monsters, the slaying of monsters being how humanity was saved by the gods. All these stories gain a level of culpability with the whole idea of angelic interference in human affairs and the traditional stories we tell about this. In the stories, the myths, the Sunday school, the temple, the mosque instruction that we get as people of the book. Now, I say I'm a people of the book because when I got here at the institute, they says, "Yeah, where are you from?" And I says, "Well, I'm from an astral pocket." And they says, "You're not from another one of the myriad ways, the infinite dimensions?" I says, "No, I'm from a place called Patchworld. It's outside the myriad ways, and created by an ancient god." It's like, "You're from the dungeon dimensions?" I'm like, "No, I can see how you'd say that." So that ended up in a long conversation. But the idea was I had to claim on my visa something that wasn't altogether true, just to get here, just to get in. Wow. So there are things I can't really say because they'll get me in trouble with the administration. But in the meantime, I would like you to consider this idea that angels bereft of the power of God still carried a bit in their genetic material and were able to transfer that through human artifice, through human bodies, into progeny that carried a bit of that angelic spark, like God to Mary, to Jesus. Huh? Yeah. So the idea being that there is a reason for Zeus, we'll call him Zeus, to gather a couple other fallen angels, let's call it, around him and create a little group that he says, "We are the gods of heaven and earth. We have defeated the ancient powers, and so now you must worship us." Right? Yeah. And the traditions from that could remain in the human memory, the vocal tradition, the oral tradition, for thousands of years, as some other stories have, including stories of angels being thrown out of heaven. Oh, Eshkalar. Yeah. So, that's my story. Angels breed with humans to spread a bit of the angelic aspect of their blood, of their bloodlines, of their genetic power and material into the human bloodlines. And from that comes some especially appropriate progeny that have that spark of angelhood in them. And these might be the folks that we call heroes, confusing that with the idea of the Nephilim, which was the very idealized story given of these things to explain the bones in the earth. But I'm not worried about explaining the bones in the earth anymore. We already know where they came from. So we now have to explain these things under the new regime, which is the lack of reason to explain these bones in the ground. And so angels mating with human women and creating 50-foot tall monsters doesn't need to be part of the lexicon anymore, because we now know that it was dinosaurs breeding with dinosaurs making dinosaurs, not angels breeding with humans making dinosaurs. I think that all three of the peoples of the book can agree on that. I know some people are still trying. I seen somebody doing something to a goat the other day. Probably trying to create a devil, right? With the goats, goat legs, the goat head. But you see the point? These ideas can percolate in ways that create mythological structures that are true to the traditions, but not honest to the truth, not honest to the actuality of the situation. In this case, let's postulate that God exists. Let's postulate that he sends angels out to do his will. I don't know that God isn't a woman. I'm just merely stating these things couched in the technology of the imprinting I received through the basis of the church I joined. That's why I wanted to tell you. I had to join an organized religion in order to get in, because I wasn't from one of the other myriad ways. I was from an astral pocket. They wanted to make sure I wasn't worshiping Odin or one of them guys. Well, his name is Othin, I think. But don't pronounce it 3 times in the dark, because Beetlejuice will appear and wash your mouth out with, I'm not allowed to say. So anyway, there's your idea. God sends angels out. Some of them decide they liked humans for whatever reason. Experimentation. I don't know. I feel the need to write the Kama Sutra. I have to talk about being human, and to do that I'll have to express myself as a human. And how do you express yourself as a human without getting a little on the side? Yeah. So that created this gap between themselves and God, apparently. Though you could handle it other ways. Maybe there's a dimensional problem. Maybe somebody set up a jammer. Maybe God has an enemy, doesn't want the angels to get back. Maybe God's being assailed in heaven, and all the angels he set off are being cut from coming back and helping. The possibilities for fantasy are endless. And since we have no proof, we can write our own story, write our own ticket. Unless God says, hey, you know what, I don't like what you're playing with there. You might want to stop everybody before I get angry. Oh. And you know, if God exists, he'll have a way of showing his displeasure. If you're so important in what you do that the doggone God of the universe has to notice you and get angry, you know, I think that you're like living a little too far up in the needle. I don't think that it's like that. A God that cares about the whole of the universe has very little interest in you as a person unless it suits his plan. I only say that because how is that otherwise in any other system we see? I personally believe that I have a relationship with God, that I can move the universe through prayer. Some of you out there are going like, whoa, old Eshkalar's walked off the deep end there. We knew he was going, but whoa, yeah. And other people are thinking like, yep, absolutely, yep. And I urge you all to accept one another, because one person's truth isn't necessarily another person's truth, or as Wild Bill says, I have to quote Wild Bill now, we're all on different places on the highway of music. We're all still on that highway. And nobody's farther along than anyone on that highway of music. We're all at just different spots. Nobody yet knows if it's a loop or open ended. Nobody knows yet if you could drive to infinity on that highway of music. Nobody's been far enough yet. We often go a certain distance and go like, no, no, I don't know that. And then we make a left and we go around in the circle, like the Washington Beltway. There's a religion called the 7-Day Loafers that believe that when you die, you get caught in the Beltway traffic forever. Closed next 3 exits. Under construction. Dear, haven't we been here before? I don't know, dear. Don't say Beetlejuice 3 times. Bernie Sanders will appear and ask you what the hell. I don't know. So anyway, that's why the angels are in the myth. Because somebody with great power and genetic power, influence, had offspring to human people. And that those offspring, some of them, all of them, I don't know what the proportion is, had some sort of spark vitae, had some sort of light within them that made them angelic enough that these fallen angels could drink their blood and maintain their power, or whatever level of power, something less than destruction. Being weak is better than being dead, right? Eking your existence out just a little at a time. Oh. And then not wanting to do it because if you do, they'll catch you. Oh, no, I don't want that. Oh, no, that happened last time and I had to run. It happened the time before that and I had to kill 1,000 people and I didn't get all the blood. So you see what I mean? Ultimately, we hope that those angels, wherever they are, get in touch with God again. In the myths, this is important because this is part of the Transylvanian myths that come down to us through translators. If an angel stops drinking blood long enough, he becomes immortal and can mate with a human female and have normal human prodigy and live a normal mortal life and fade away from the earth like all humans do at the end. A sort of reward, an assimilation back into the fold. So this is Eshkalar on angels, Eshkalar on devils, Eshkalar on vampires and werewolves, because I think they're roughly the same. The ones that drink the blood do so out of perversion. Any of them could be suited by just eating the raw meat, just like eating a human like a prey animal. But the vampires affect a higher level of human society, humanesque society, to show their superiority, whereas werewolves could care less. They just rove the night looking for something to kill until they're backed into a corner, stabbed with, I don't know, what do you got that's silver? Granddad's false teeth. Could you imagine getting to the gates of hell and Satan comes to meet you and he says, well, what happened to you? I was stabbed to death by some guy's grandpa's silver teeth. He's going to close the door. He's not going to let you in because they'll start laughing at him if you let people like you in. So anyway, this is Eshkalar on angels, devils, vampires, werewolves, and that nut of truth, that grain of truth that lies inside of all the great mythological structures. Some of them permeate multiple cultures. There are African vampires too, and there are South American vampires in the mythologies. This is Eshkalar, flying off to a new magical cloak. Ow, I gotta dematerialize before I do that.